Bon après-midi, tout le monde.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 58 of the House of Commons Standing Committee of Industry and Technology pursuant to the order of reference on Monday, December 12, 2022. We're meeting on the mandate of the Minister of Industry, Science and Technology. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of Thursday, June 23, 2022. And we have with us Honorable Minister François Philippe Champagne, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, accompanied by Simon Kennedy, Deputy Minister. Welcome, Minister. You're familiar with the proceedings of our committee. Without further ado, I give you the floor for 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. First, I would like to thank the colleagues. I think you are members of one of the most important House of Commons committee to ensure Canada's long-term prosperity. So it's a pleasure to be with you as we define Canada's industrial policy, which will have prosperity for Canadians into the future.
At the committee today, and I apologize last time. I think I was scheduled and some things happened because I would say this committee is so critical to informing, shaping, and advancing our industrial policy, as I was saying. And I'm grateful for the thoughts, for the work, and the leadership of the committee in certainly helping us to shape the best possible industrial policy. Mr. Chair, as 2023 unfolds, the Canadian and global economies continues to change rapidly. Profound forces are reshaping whole industries as well as domestic and global supply chains. We are living at a time of a green and digital transformation of our economy, and this opens generational opportunities for Canada. A digital revolution is transforming how and where business is done, a phenomenon being driven by frontier technologies such as AI, quantum, and biotech. And I just want to say the committee this morning announced a further investment on AI at Scale AI, one of our global innovation clusters. And I must say, coming back from Washington, some of the members were with me. Sébastien Lemire était avec moi la semaine dernière à Washington. Je peux vous dire.
With me last week in Washington, D.C., and our U.S. neighbors certainly understand our leadership role when it comes to these new technologies, AI, quantum, and biotech, that will help us advance.
Change are becoming more obvious every day, driving governments, investors, and consumers to demand low carbon, green products and services. And finally, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and a complex geopolitical environment have underlined the risk of volatile supply chains and a need for adaptability and resiliency. And I continue going back to my trip in Washington last week with the Minister of Defense. Resilient supply chain was really the topic that everyone wanted to talk about with Canada. Countries are recognizing that in the future, strong, resilient economies will need to be digital, they'll need to be sustainable, and driven by scientific and technological excellence. As such, we have worked diligently to create the conditions for Canada's success. Monsieur le Président, le Canada est...
Chair, Canada has a unique opportunity, I'd say a generational opportunity, to be a leader for the economy of tomorrow because we can offer everything the Canadian economy needs, one based on knowledge, more digital, more sustainable. In fact, I believe that Canada could be the choice strategic partner for our allies around the world. We have what the economy of the 21st century needs, and this is the message and vision that I shared in recent visits to Tokyo, Berlin, Seoul, and elsewhere, even Washington last week.
Partners, the question is no longer why Canada, but rather how and when Canada. They realize that we have what very few countries can offer. We have the 5 elements which drive investment. First is talent. Canada is still a very big magnet for talent, and I see my colleague Sébastien Lemire, who heard me say that more than once in all our meetings. The second thing is strong ecosystems. You see that in the auto sector, in the EV industry, in aerospace, in biomanufacturing. We have key natural resources like critical minerals to be able to manufacture the batteries and the semiconductor. We have abundant renewable energy as supply chain are getting greener. the fact that we can produce green steel, green aluminum, and I hope to produce green batteries and green semiconductors. And finally, access to market. I always remind people around the world, and you've heard me say that, Mr. Chair, we're not a country of 38 million people, but a country which gives preferential market access to 1.5 billion consumers. And that is a message that is resonating around the world. I don't need to tell you that more than ever, proximity to resources, market, and assembly lines are dictating investment decisions. And that's why I think Canada has been winning a number of strategic investments recently. Supply chains are going from global to regional, with more emphasis on resiliency than pure efficiency. These new market dynamics play very well to Canada's strength. Mr. Chair, allow me to illustrate my point with a few concrete examples. Dans le secteur des sciences,
in life sciences and biomanufacturing sector, we've made huge investments to better protect Canadians' health and ensure their safety. We have attracted leading companies to Canada like Moderna in Montreal. We've strengthened the foothold and the presence of leaders in Canada like Sanofi in Toronto, and we've supported companies in Vancouver. And we have aerospace sector projects worth nearly $2 billion that have been launched, challenging industry leaders to look to the future, invest in sustainable aviation, including hybrid propulsion and biofuels. People are looking at what Canada is doing in these areas. Look at the president of Boeing, who said he was well aware of what's going on in Canada. In the automotive sector, we're on track for the next 20, 30 years with a complete EV and battery ecosystem from mining to recycling. And you can just think of recent investments like GM POSCO, Umicore, and Ligi Stellantis, which is building the first battery gigafactory in Canada. And Bloomberg recently said Canada is number 2 for the battery ecosystem, just behind China and the States. And what's interesting is that all this has unfolded in less than 1 year. We have carved ourselves an enviable position. And so we've not only secured key commitments from all the major automakers already in Canada, but also recently signed historic agreements, for instance, Volkswagen and Mercedes, with the recent German Chancellor's visit. And also, we've been working with ArcelorMittal and Algoma, as well as for aluminum with Rio Tinto and Alcoa. So, in short, we are positioning Canada to lead in key economic centers in the next century based on the green transition. We have to redouble our efforts to become leaders in hydrogen production. We have to also invest in green technologies, fintech, biotech, and we have to also consider the possibility of producing semiconductors here in Canada, thus integrating the country into North American value chain. When I was in Washington, I talk about the Albany-Bromont corridor. That is a corridor we could put in place and enable us to advance the semiconductor sector in North America.
Which is at the very core and a key driver of innovation. Someone recently told me in the plane, they said the research of today is the economy of tomorrow. And I think it could not be better said. That's why we recently recapitalized the Pan-Canadian Artificial Intelligence Strategy with more than $443 million in support of commercialization, standardization, and talent and research. We also announced more than $360 million to our national quantum strategy to capitalize on Canada's leadership position in quantum. And the good news is that it's already bearing fruit with Canadian champions like Xanadu. I don't know if colleagues know, but Xanadu is the only company in the world which has a quantum computer which is dedicated to battery chemistry. Everyone you talk around the world in the OEM know about Xanadu, and this is a real Canadian champion. So this is about applied quantum, which is making a difference. And I would say we have also doubled down on our commitment to invest in research and development so that we can ensure our competitiveness, Mr. Chair. This morning, as I said, I just announced not only that we would double down on AI, but announced that we are further investing $750 million in the Global Innovation Clusters program, and that we will be working with our partner in the private sector to obviously generate significant investment. This funding will help scale up innovative ecosystems in an area of significant Canadian competitive advantage, including digital economies that we see a lot in Western Canada, the protein industries, how can we feed the world with plant protein, advanced manufacturing, which is serving well our ecosystem, and I know my colleague Brian Massey knows all about that, artificial intelligence, which we already have an head start, for supply chain and logistics, and finally, ocean technologies for calling on the East Coast, where Canada also is punching above its weight. We're also launching a new lab-to-market platform to help graduate students and researchers commercialize their work. There are new targeted scholarships and fellowships for promising Black student researchers, as we will soon be announcing a cohort of new internationally recruited Canada's excellence research chairs in the STEM fields, Mr. Chair, I should say. Mr. Chair, before I conclude my remarks, I want to take the opportunity briefly, as I see that my time is going fast, to say a word about an issue that recently made some headlines, which is regarding research security. First, let me be very clear to Canadians who are watching. Protecting Canadian research and intellectual property against foreign interference, espionage, and theft is our government top priority, and it is my top priority. That's why in 2021, I issued national security guidelines for research partnership, investing $160 million to help universities to build their internal capacity. That said, it is clear that more needs to be done. We all need to do more, including the provinces and universities. And as I said to the Science Committee, Mr. Chair, we'll be coming up with new mandatory rules to make sure that we tighten it up in light of what we're seeing. That's why earlier this month, I directed the Canada Foundation for Innovation, or I will be directing them very shortly, to take a new and stronger posture when it comes to research security. So all the granting agencies, Mr. Chair, will have new mandatory guidelines they need to follow in order to protect our research in light of what we've seen. And I will also write to representatives of Canada's universities to urge them to do likewise for all their research partnerships, and more particularly the partnerships involving sensitive research. So my message, we're going to do more. The provinces need to do more. The university needs to do more. And that's, I think, is how we're going to be protecting. En terminant, Monsieur le Président.
In ending, Mr. Chair, let me say that Canada has never been as well positioned to really take every opportunity for a resilient and prosperous future. We're in a good position to be a choice partner worldwide. And I can tell everyone in ending, let's seize the opportunities before us. Let's be ambitious, and let's make Canada a leader in the economy of the 21st century. I'll be glad to answer your questions. Thank you very much, Minister. Without further ado, Mr. Perkins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. I know that I speak for all of us when we wish we had the full 2 hours with you because we have a lot of things to cover. And I see that you were in Washington last week, and that there was a balloon drop done for you, presumably by China, maybe. And maybe that's because this government has been so open towards Chinese investment in Canada. So I'd like to ask you to start off. Your predecessor allowed the takeover of the Tanco mine, Canada's only lithium-producing mine, in 2019 to be taken over by Sinomine, a Chinese state-owned enterprise, without any national security review. And I'm wondering why last year, when you as minister asked 3 Chinese state-owned enterprises to divest of their lithium holdings, why you didn't ask them, Tanco, to be included in that as well.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Here we go. So first of all, thank you for the question. As you know, there's nothing more important in protecting our national security, as you would know, Mr. Perkins. That's why I even proposed that we amend the Investment in Canada Act just to make sure that we have more tools in order to protect our national security. You will recall at that time, as you said, that I blocked the 3 Chinese potential takeover of Canadian mines. And you will note that under the law, this is not the law does not allow a retrospective view of certain transactions. That's why you've seen me at many steps of the way to strengthen the rules when it comes to state-owned enterprises and in this case, to make sure that we'd protect national security, because not only we did that, but you remember that when it came to sensitive sectors and when it came to critical minerals, I've been very clear that I will stand up for Canadian national interest. And today, I think, and going back to Washington, I think our colleagues understand more and more that national security
I don't want to interrupt,
and
but
economic
I have
prosperity go
limited
in
time, so it was. I understand that, so I assume that you're open to some looking at that as an issue, the retroactivity of some of these things. In that trip to Washington, you met with a number of aerospace companies, including Boeing, and there have been reports in terms of the replacement of the Aurora aircraft that you and your colleague, the Minister of National Defense, are not looking at an open bidding process for that, and in fact are maybe excluding some of our important Canadian aerospace companies from the bidding on the replacement of that. So could you confirm to us today at committee that that will be an open bidding process for Canadian companies?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you. In fact, the purpose of the meeting, if I may say, and I'll come to your question, of the trip in Washington was really to draw investment back in Canada, to tell these big aerospace and defense firms that there needs to be a bit more balance when it comes to investment. Just like we did in the auto sector, I was saying we need to have this kind of vision that there would be investments on both sides of the border. And I think this was a message that needed to be conveyed to these companies. And you mentioned the CEO of Boeing. That's exactly what we said. When it comes to procurement, Mr. Perkins, that is a matter for the Minister of Procurement. So, but what I can say, we always strive to make sure that Canadian companies, and in fact, I think that the Canadian companies have no better partners than me, the Minister of Defense, and the Minister of Procurement, when it comes to insisting that in these major programs, there'd be Canadian content, not only on the Canadian fleet, but on the global fleet. And I'm happy just to say to Canadians, and I'll give you more time, that there'll be a piece of Canada in every F-35 jets flying around the world.
I understand that because they make F-35 jets parts in my riding in Lunenburg. But the issue is about Canada buying a replacement for its own planes, and that there have been reports that you and the minister will not be allowing Canadian firms. So I'm glad to hear that you're open to having Canadian firms bid on that contract.
Well, not only we did that, but Mr. Perkins, we did more than that. We insisted and we advocated. We're part of their marketing team. When we go to Washington, it's about protecting Canadian jobs. It's about making sure
that,
Canadian
Minister,
companies
my question
will be part
wasn't
of these big programs.
question wasn't about the U.S. purchases of planes. It was about Canada. I'm going to go on to my next question, which is, Rogers has set a date of this Friday for your approval of the sale of Freedom to Quebecor. And so we're assuming that you're going to deal with the Rogers deadline of Friday and make a pronouncement. Now, Quebecor in the past has made vast commitments to Canada in getting spectrum in English Canada, that they will create another carrier, and in every single instance have betrayed that commitment to the government of Canada and actually sold that spectrum for a $331 million profit of an asset the Canadian taxpayer owns. So in this process, Videotron once again has put forward a business plan to the Competition Tribunal to try and convince them that they mean it this time after selling 100 licenses. So I am skeptical because past behavior dictates future behavior. So will you as minister make the commitment, the business plan that convinced the tribunal that this is an acceptable deal, a condition of fulfillment of the license transfer and if they do not live up to that, they will have their spectrum removed?
So first of all, I'm not bound by any artificial deadline. I'm the regulator. I will make my decision whenever I come to the conclusion that we have looked at every aspect, and in particular, the decision of the Federal Court of Appeals. So I want to be very clear with Canadians. There is no deadline. I'm reviewing, obviously, all the facts with respect to this transaction. And let me be clear, Mr. Perkins, you and I have the same objective. My mission is to reduce prices for cell phone in Canada. That's the mission. And that's what I've been relentless in making sure that this will happen. And we know that the best way to reduce
on the
price.
question
Yeah, I'll
of the business plan?
just to make sure the best way we do that is through competition. And what we have found in Canada is to have a fourth national player. So one thing is sure, I have Canadians back. I understand at a time of high inflation, people want to see their cell phone bills down. And you've heard me before that I said, even before the competition tribunal went out, I said, whomever is going to come in front of me, there will be very specific conditions. One of them was no flipping. The other one was the
They
lower
can flip
rates that
after
you're
10
seeing
years, so.
in Quebec would be applied in British Columbia and Alberta and Ontario. So you can rest assured, Mr. Perkins, as a lawyer, I'll make sure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted to make sure that Canadians are protected. That's my duty to Canadians.
Thank you, Minister. Je passerai maintenant la parole à Madame Lapointe.
Now, Madame Lapointe, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, Minister Champagne. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you, Ms. Laplante. It's a pleasure. Mr. Minister, we know that critical minerals are essential to reach our climate objectives and for the manufacture of EVs and batteries. Can you explain to the committee how the government grants the priority to that sector and how our investments have been well used to date? Well, thank you for asking a question on critical minerals. Indeed, it's an important issue. Canada is the only country in the West that has all the critical minerals to manufacture batteries: manganese, lithium, nickel, minerals that will help us not only manufacture batteries, but also manufacture semiconductors. And that is why we launched a national strategy for critical minerals, precisely to be able to develop a good range. But we don't want to just exploit mines. We want to keep the added value here at home, which means that we've been able to attract big players, GM POSCO, you'll recall, in Bécancour. Now, when people in Tokyo talk to us about Bécancour, we know we've come a long way, and people realize we're building ecosystems. And the same with other examples. One of the realities that makes a difference is, the proximity of the resources and the markets. And that's why we've seen big investments. Volkswagen, and I'm not the one to have said it, but the big boss at Volkswagen said recently, Canada is a logical choice. I didn't say it. It was Volkswagen in Germany's big box. So we've come a long way. When it comes to critical minerals, I repeat it everywhere when I travel abroad, but also here at home. We have all the critical minerals we need for the battery ecosystem, but also the ecosystems of the 21st century. Thank you.
Countries during the past few months, you highlighted some of them in your opening statements, and these visits seem to have been received positively with the international community, who seem to be keen to have Canada as a partner. So can you tell the committee, what are you hearing from industries abroad? What the international community is saying about Canada as a destination for their businesses, and about how we are enticing these international business partners to Canada?
That's a very good question. At a time of much uncertainty in the world, where you have geopolitical challenges, where you have a war in Ukraine, and when you have shortage in your supply chain, Canada offers unparalleled stability, predictability, and the rule of law. And I would say this is in high demand and short supply in the world. So the first thing is that people realize that Canada really is that beacon when it comes to stability and predictability. The other thing I would say is that when you talk to leaders around the world, and you're right, we hosted the Prime Minister of Japan, we had the President of Korea, we had the German Chancellor, we came from Washington last week. There's three things which is top of mind to leaders around the world today. It's energy security, food security, and supply chain resiliency. And in that, my message to them is that Canada is your supply of choice. We can be your best friend when it comes to that, because Canada can be a partner to our colleagues from Japan and Korea on the Asia-Pacific side. We can be a partner, obviously, to our U.S. friends. Just think about the semiconductors. I was saying it's good that our colleagues down south will be producing more semiconductors, but I think it's not well known that Canada is, in fact, the place where most of them are packaged and tested. So at the same time that they're increasing production, we need to increase packaging and testing. That's my point about the Albany-Beaumont corridor, when we can do more together. So when I talk to my friends in Washington, I say the big prize for us is how can we innovate more together, how can we build more together, and how can we sell more together to the rest of the world. And I think there is this understanding around the world today. What differentiates the Canadian economy to other economies is talent. Because the first thing that people are looking for is talent. And I'm grateful to say to all the workers, it's thanks to their know-how, excellence, and I would say expertise that we can attract these big investments. The second is obviously natural resources and the strength of our ecosystem. But renewable energy is key. All these big OEMs in the world, they want to green their supply chain. So Canada comes into play, and access to market makes the difference. I'll tell you, when I was in front of the CEO of one of the largest automaker in Japan, he said, that's the best pitch I've ever heard in my life. But I said, that's not me. This is about Canada. So for them, they look at that and they say, you've got everything we need. Some of them would say, that's how we have been able to attract companies like Volkswagen to have an interest in Canada. And Mercedes-Benz, who would have said? And now they're looking at that. So trust me, I'll continue to make the case for Canada everywhere I go.
Merci. Et si
Thank you.
Il vous reste à peu près 30 secondes.
You have 30 seconds left, Madame Lapointe.
investments through the Strategic Infrastructure Fund are so important. The Net Zero Accelerator, the regional development agencies. I know for Northern Ontario, programs like FedNor provide such excellent support. Can you just quickly tell the committee about these important ISED programs and how they are creating jobs?
Well, this is all about jobs. You know, everything I just said before, I know time is limited, but I would say, Madame Lapointe, it's all about creating jobs, opportunities, but also not only looking at the jobs of today, but the jobs of the future. That's why when I talk to CEO, I say, don't ask me what you need next week. Tell me where the industry is going in 20 years from now. And that's what we have done in aerospace, for example, where now we've seen investment of close to $2 billion. So my point is, you know, you leverage private capital to create jobs today, but also position Canada in the economy of the future.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lemay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lemire. The floor is yours. 6 minutes. Thank you, Minister, for being here. I noticed in your preliminary remarks and in your answers, you've neglected to mention the notion of predictability and stability of the supply chain. This is normally something you mention in your speeches, be it in Washington, Korea, Japan. Now, with regard to predictability, there is an issue. You are bringing this to the table, but we're awaiting for answers. Think of Rogers Shaw Videotron. I think we're at a stage where we have to move into action, especially with the Fox project and the animosity being created. There's really there's not much clarity on how the fourth player can be involved. So I invite you to take a position as soon as possible on that transaction. Now, what about C27 and C34? How come C27 has not been put back on the agenda, and this for some time, by your government? It seems to me you have time to bring back that bill to this committee here. You've done your homework on the protection of data, and as to AI, we have a lot of questions asked, but we would like you to bring those bills back. Well, that's music to my ears, Mr. Lemire. You are a colleague I hold you in high regard. If C27 isn't moving forward, we shouldn't look here, but rather at other colleagues. We're willing to push it forward. If you look at the digital charter, well, C27 is the digital charter. And so I think of the chapter on the protection of children. After the COVID crisis, we've seen kids spend more and more time in the digital world. We have a responsibility as MPs to study that bill so that we better protect our children, and also to set guidelines for artificial intelligence. I want that to be at the service of the people, so I'm very glad the Bloc is wanting to support us, and I hope your colleagues, Conservatives and NDPers will do the same. I think we do have this opportunity with this bill to make Canada stand out worldwide. I recently talked about it with our European friends. I said the bill that we are tabling is one of the most innovative in the world, and we want companies to be able to benefit. So there is urgency to act. So I would ask the questions to our Conservative friends. Another aspect, something been waiting for some years, the review of a copyright legislation. So access copyright and copyback. You have had a book, a white paper produced on this. What can you say about the urgency of copyright protection? I'm listening. There are many priorities. You've just talked about C27, C34. There are many things. And of course, the reform of copyright is also important. I've been working with Minister Rodriguez. I've been hearing their representations. I've been listening to the universities also. So that is a part of our priorities. And we continue to work with industry. I have much respect for creators, men and women. They do a great deal, and we need to be there for them, and we will be there. And we've sent letters to you and those who have preceded you. So the aerospace, there's been a study on aerospace recently, and it showed there's a urgency to have a national policy, and there's a need for predictability there for investment. So you have the multi-mission aircraft projects and surveillance. You just were in Washington. You know that there are some fears there. What can you do to reassure the aerospace and aeronautical industry for the kind of treatment you're going to be able to offer? How are we going to be able to help companies so essential to this industry in Quebec? Yes, aerospatial is going well here at home. Mr. Legault talked about it being the highest investment. I was with him recently with Mr. Trudeau when we made an announcement, and there are no fears to be had in Washington. What we did was we went there to seek opportunities so Canadian companies can get involved not just in pan-Canadian projects, but worldwide projects. The idea was to go there and speak to our partners. And the logic, Mr. Lemire, is think what we do with Autopact, two sides of the border. So there is going to be investments in defense, not just here at home, but in most NATO countries. Canada is well positioned to be a choice partner. And I said that to industry. And with this trip to Washington, we are there to open doors. We spent hours with the most important CEOs of defense industry companies to work with our companies, Aeroneftek or other companies, CAE, and leaders in the industry. And our message was to reinforce the position of our Canadian companies. So not just for Canadian programs, but for global projects. And our colleague, Mr. Perkins, says, Canada is contributing parts to these aircraft, but we want more. I'm not satisfied with what we're seeing now. I want more investments in Canada. I want more partnerships. I want the Canadian aerospace supply chain to be integrated in the big American defense programs. And that's the message we delivered. And you were with me. So you're well aware of what we said. What we said at the Wilson Center is exactly what we said in private to the CEOs of the largest companies. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lemire. Mr. Massey, 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here. And I think you're the 9th minister I've had the chance to.
Is that a good thing?
And that's actually good. And I'll give you credit.
Is that
no,
a good
you're the
thing or bad
busiest.
thing, Mr. Chair? I don't know how to take that.
You're the busiest by far, and that's a good thing. But I do want to take one issue, though. You just left a C27 at the hands of us as members of Parliament. But I want to correct the record here in that has your House Leader asked for time for C-27. My information is your House Leader has not. So C-27 cannot go back into the House of Commons unless your party brings it there. You brought C-34 instead. So why won't your House Leader bring C-27 to the floor of the House of Commons if you think it's so important, if you're going to lay the blame to committee and other members of Parliament?
No, listen, I'm not in a blaming game.
Well, you did.
No,
You
but
said
I'm
it's
saying,
not in
no,
the House and it's being held back.
We need to work together. I mean, I'm saying
So-
C-27 is for Canada. It's not for members of
So
Parliament.
why won't your House Leader bring it forward then?
Listen, my understanding, and I'm happy, Mr. Massey, you and I work very well together, and we've known each other for a long time. I will take it upon the House Leader. My understanding, and I say that openly, was that there were discussions among different leaders of different parties, and there was not a way forward. If I hear today that there is, I'm more than happy. I committed to the industry and to Canadians that we would have a digital charter as soon as possible. So I'll ask the question to the Conservatives. If they're willing to support, I think we'll have a way
at the end of the
forward.
day, you have control of the House. And at any rate, I just think it's important, though, not to, nobody's being obstructionist on C-27 here. There's lots of concerns about the bill. As the NDP split the bill in terms of voting because there's some new sections which are very important for us to go through. So there's a lot of interest out there, and we're getting a lot of contact to our actual members' offices. So I just wanted to highlight, though, that it isn't ourselves holding back that process.
Appreciate. So we'll be working together on
yeah.
that, and that's what I hear from colleagues around this table. So we'll be working on that
Yeah,
together.
especially the AI stuff is in particular of importance and needs a lot of attention. So I want to move on to one thing that's kind of associated to your role at Cabinet, though, because it's an emerging issue, and I appreciate the work that's been done on auto. We still don't have a national auto strategy, which I would prefer to have, but there's been some good announcements. You've actually done some good work on Stellantis and other types of initiatives that we have, and I do really appreciate that. But the City of Windsor right now, as a disaster mitigation adaptation fund, is dealing with a flooding and a whole series of things. And your government right now was in a 60 to 40% ratio of supporting those projects. Right now, though, because of inflation, your government won't move off the percentage it had before. So I'm just wondering if this has been made to your attention, because keeping the cities through innovation and participating in these projects is going to be a big issue if they have to come up with hundreds of millions of dollars potentially for projects that were pre-approved. So I'm just wondering if that's been raised to Cabinet. I know this is something maybe might be new, but are you aware of what's taking place? Because Ontario hasn't come to the table on that to date, and it could affect the city's capability of retaining employees and also making sure that we have the proper people in place.
Well, I'll say I was not aware specifically of the City of Windsor's request, but as a former infrastructure minister, I'm very sensitive to that because I used to manage the fund in my former capacity, so I'm very well aware. Listen, like you said, not only you said we did well, but I think we should all take pride as Canadians that we have renewed the mandates with all the automakers in Canada, and now we've been attracting the likes of Volkswagen to at least engage in a very serious discussion with us, LG Stellantis, as you said, which will be somehow transformational. Those are generational opportunities. But to your point about Windsor, Mr. Massey, I'm happy to take that back with colleagues and see how can we help, because we want Windsor, which is kind of the center in many respects of our auto sector, to be able to thrive in this new economy, and we're very committed to Windsor and the workers there.
And that's all I'm asking for now, because this is infrastructure money that was allocated before in your past is one of the reasons I wanted to raise it here.
Sure.
It's new, and if it undermines the municipalities, it's because of inflation costs with previously signed construction contracts. I'll send you some information, but I
appreciate that.
It's just emerging, but it's critical because we can't keep talent, as you know, is one of the
I appreciate that,
the biggest thing.
and you've been a good colleague
So-
in trying to achieve that.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I'm going to move over to Metacasco with regards to it.
Sorry?
Metacago.
Sorry.
Sorry, Metacago. I said Metacasco. Yeah,
No,
that's
I
another
don't
one.
know.
That might be emerging.
It's my English.
Yeah, no. It highlights a problem that we had. So in Windsor and similar to the auto, we had NEMAC. That was an automotive sector. The previous minister, Minister Baines, provided some federal funding for them. They took the innovation, the money, and then they actually moved it to Mexico, including the plant. And so what I'm worried about is the current bill that you have, C-34, whether there's actually going to be enough support in there to stop that from happening. So the NEMAC example is one that, basically we innovated a new transmission equipment, and then they moved it to Mexico. Then they moved all the jobs. So they took our innovation, they took our all of the work that we had done. They laid off a bunch of workers, and we lost that. Now, Medicago is a similar situation that's taking place here. So, what can you tell us in terms of an update on that, and how do we stop this from happening?
Well, I'm not sure we can equate two situations. I'm not familiar with the first one you mentioned, but in Medicago, I can tell you, Mr. Massey, we're in solution mode. My first priority and everyone's priority should be to keep the jobs. We have 400 people extremely talented in Quebec City. The second thing is the facility, because we have amazing facilities which have been new built, and we want to protect that. And the third one is the IP. Because, the thing about Medicago, and I've heard a lot of things, but I think it's the first vaccines that has been approved in the last 20 years in Canada, made in Canada vaccine, should I say. And so for me, this is quite significant. And it's the first plant vaccine in the world, plant-based vaccine in the world. So people look at Medicago today, but people should remember when we did that at the time, you remember, we wanted to invest in all the platforms of vaccines because no one knew exactly at the time what would work. Now what I can tell you, we're in solution mode. I spoke to the CEO of Mitsubishi Chemicals in Japan. I made sure that we'll protect all our rights, but the focus as we speak today, my focus with the government of Quebec and the mayor is to protect jobs. It's about people. Then I'll make sure that we have all our rights preserved and that we will retain our rights with respect to all sorts of arrangements we have. And just to say that I want to thank my deputy, Simon Kennedy, because to your point, I think that our contribution agreement today have far more specificity in terms of protecting Canadian taxpayers, in terms of all the commitments they have to follow. Otherwise, we have recourse.
What is our final liability with regards to the contributions we've made and vaccines that we have to purchase or have not been made? What is our exposure at this point?
At the time, you may know or not know, but I shifted that because there was a time, where we saw Medicago, like others, miss the window of COVID-19, and the investment shifted not for COVID, but for the future, because the interesting on the plant-based, and I spoke myself to the Director General of the World Health Organization, and if you talk to specialists, they'd say there's a lot of potential in a plant-based vaccine, that the next big thing may need a plant-based
What's
vaccine.
our number, though? What's our exposure on this?
Well, we're reviewing all the agreements we have, because at that time we shifted that to make sure that they would focus on the future, not on the past. And what I can tell you today, my focus is about the jobs. We have all the legal recourse, and I can assure you, in Canadians, I spoke to the CEO of Mitsubishi in Japan. They will honor all their commitment to the government of Canada and the government of Quebec. But priority number one now is about jobs.
I'd still like to know a number, though, in terms of our exposure.
Unfortunately, Mr. Massey, it will be for another one.
Thank you, but I still would like to know that exposure.
Thank you. We'll now turn to Mr. Williams for 5 minutes.
There you go. Thank you very much, Minister. Nice to see you in the hot seat today. I'm going to start.
Every day is the hot seat, sir.
We'd like to have you 2 hours, though, maybe next time. So, Minister, you have a good quote about competition. You say you will never waver in your commitment to promote competition and make wireless services the most affordable for Canadians. So we can agree on that much. I've been very vocal on. I feel there's been a competition failure in the divestiture of Freedom Mobile and from the Rogers-Shaw merger, and the point of that was that Rogers, the number one and the most expensive wireless carrier in the world by the stats, and the number one market shareholder in Canada, was freely able, in buying an asset from Shaw, to control what that divestiture was going and who it was from Shaw Freedom Mobile and who it was going to sell it to. So the fourth competitor was, of course, Videotron, and it did so without the approval and the remedy process from the Competition Bureau. And of course, we saw what happened in the tribunal. What was more disturbing is that there were competitors that were trying to be involved in that deal and they were shut out. Global Live, Distributel, each offered almost $900 million more to buy that asset from Shaw Mobile, and yet they were excluded as a whole. The premise, what we heard from testimony when we had this committee and investigated that, there was a couple of alarming testimony from that. Number one, through lobbyist registries, we found that you met with Rogers 5 times last year. ICE had met 60 times with Rogers, and yet Global Live and Distributel both claimed that they couldn't get a meeting at all, couldn't get a call, couldn't get a meeting. We found that when it came to NDAs that Rogers had signed, they would not they would give a different one to Global Live than they gave to anyone else. They certainly weren't engaging with Global Live or others. The system seemed to be broken in the fact that when the competition for competitors of a divestiture, it seems like Rogers could just pick who it wanted to deal with, and more importantly, who it didn't want to deal with. So if it came to Global Live or it came to Distributel, if it decided not to engage with those, the process was completely eliminated. So my first question to you, sir, do you feel that process was fair in how that was handled?
I would say as the regulator, I would challenge the data you just presented, because as the regulator, I'm very careful not to meet anyone personally when it comes to something, a matter which is in front of me as the regulator.
It's in the lobbyist registration.
I don't choose, yeah, but they may specify who they met. Because I can assure I've never met in private with the CEO of Rogers. The only time I spoke to him was when we had this failure of Rogers that I had to intervene to protect the interests of Canadians. As a regulator, I'm very careful to make sure that not only there's justice, but appearance of justice in everything we do, and I can assure you of that. The thing I would say as the regulator, Mr. Williams, and you probably know the law, I don't choose the parties who come in front of me. The parties come in front of me. I'm the regulator. I'm not party to that.
But do you think it's fair? My question was,
no,
is it
but
fair?
my point, as the regulator,
Yeah, but you can
I said
answer.
no to the transfer of Shaw to Rogers. That is on the record. And now what's in front of me, I don't choose the party. The file that I have in front of me is Shaw wanting to transfer license Spectrum to Videotron.
So, Minister, I'm
That's
going
what is
to
in front of
contradict
me
you here just
today.
for one thing. The CEO of Rogers did testify in this committee. He stated, and this was a response to some of our members in testimony, I'm walking you through the criteria that the minister laid out for us as we work through this criteria in terms of having a balance sheet and having operating experience, but also importantly, having a credible path to 5G. The minister claimed that you gave him criteria in which you would approve, or the CEO, sorry, of Rogers, of the criteria that you would approve the divestiture of Videotron. The CEO claimed that. And what it seems to be from his testimony was when, especially with the one criteria, having a very critical path to 5G, if your department stated that in the 60 meetings they had, or you had any of the discussions with him, that left only one competitor. The only competitor was Videotron. Global Live, Distributel, they at that point weren't involved. Is it fair that would have been set up? It seems to be it was a secret deal. And I'm just asking, I know that you're the regulator. I know at the end what's great about this process is you have the final say, and you've stated that. Can we at least hear from your side that that perhaps was not a fair deal? And perhaps as a regulator, you can say maybe there's a way we go back to the divestiture. There's better ways we see more competitive processes. So we have the best competitor, not a competitor that our largest telecommunication carrier selected full and outright.
Listen, I appreciate your question, and I appreciate the work of the committee. You know, as a lawyer and a regulator in this matter, I'm very careful about how these things happen because I do know a bit about how they should work in terms of making sure that there's appropriate considerations given to all of that. What I can tell you, and nothing that I've said in everything that I say, sorry, should have been, I said that in public. So in a sense, when I said that there'd be conditions, and you remember, Mr. Williams, this came way before the Competition Tribunal. I said, I laid out a number of conditions. I said, regardless of what the Competition Bureau will do at the Competition Tribunal, let me tell you what I will only consider, and I will not allow the transfer of license for anyone. I said they would have to keep it for at least 10 years, that the rates that you're saying would have to be applied to other provinces. And I can tell you in that, Mr. Williams.
I'm so sorry, there's only so much time. The
ahead.
CEO of Rogers specifically said that one of your conditions was having 5G at a critical path to 5G. So did you say that to the minister, yes or no?
I would say I cannot comment about his testimony, but I can tell you the conditions I put are in public. All the comments
He's
that I
stating
made.
these are private conditions
Listen,
you set.
I cannot comment about his testimony, but I can tell you what I do because I'm the regulator. So I happens
But
to know
you
what
can,
the
you can
regulator
say if his
does.
testimony's wrong.
Yeah, but I'm the regulator. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
I'm the regulator. Those are witnesses who come in front of you. I'm the regulator. The regulator looks at the file presented
Sir,
to
I
him.
get that. Did
So
he
that's how
mislead?
it
Did the
works.
CEO of Rogers mislead the committee by stating that?
Listen, that's your assertion. What I'm saying, I'm the regulator. And I've said that my role is to protect the Canadian public. I want lower prices for Canadian. I want more competition. And the best way to achieve that in Canada is having a fourth national player. And I will defend Canadian public interest at every stage. And that's why you've seen me very publicly to impose condition. And just for the record that can you understand, my jurisdiction is not about competition. My jurisdiction under the Telecom Act in Canada is about spectrum, which not to look at the competition aspect, is to look at the spectrum transfer. And that's why I take that responsibility seriously. And even though I've imposed, and I said there will be conditions to whomever is coming in front of me, because I want to make sure that be better price for Canadians.
And I
that's
appreciate
what
that,
I should do
Minister.
as a
And
regulator.
you know, and I know you're a lawyer and regulator, those conditions aren't enforceable. Because again.
Well, that's what you say. Trust me when you see.
Well, I know
you'll,
that,
you'll
but
be pleased.
what I guess I'm just
But
saying
I've
is
not
I
made a
hope.
decision. We'll see what happened because, like I said,
Yeah.
I am no near a decision. There'll be a decision in due course. But what I've said is that whatever I say, whatever is going to be applied, will have to be fully enforceable.
Well,
Thank
and
you,
I
thank
appreciate
you,
that,
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Okay,
As
thank
much
you.
as I enjoy this exchange, we'll have to turn to Mr. Dung for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Minister, it's really good to see you here. Let's change the channel. So Canadian post-secondary institutions play a critical role in making Canada a global leader in science and innovation. In my writing of Dom Ali Noor, Seneca College does a fantastic job supporting the local businesses, entrepreneurs, especially with their applied research. So can you tell the committee a little bit about the importance of funding for science and research, and the importance that the important role that post-secondary institutions play in that process?
I'd like to say, well, first of all, thank you for the question. I keep saying the science of today is the economy of tomorrow. So our commitment to research and science is very important because you've seen, I think since 2016, we've invested $14 billion to really make sure that Canada would take the place that it has in the past when it comes to research, and that we could have evidence-based decision made by the government and inform of our decisions. So the investment we've done in science, I would say, are historic. Obviously, we always need to do more because it's good that we have done so, but we need to do more. And certainly, we've been supporting applied research, fundamental research, and I meet regularly with the different universities to see how can we do more together. And not only looking at the government, but looking also who could we partner with, looking at what's going on in Germany, looking at what's doing, what our colleagues are doing in the United States, trying to find new forms to make sure that the research and the inventions that are created by our labs and our researchers, talented researchers that we have across Canada, can transform themselves into a products and a service. So very pleased of what I see. And certainly, I must say, research excellence is something that I would say is recognized around the world when it comes to Canada. And I go back to my piece about talent. Canada is a big magnet for talent, and we need to continue to invest so that we remain at the forefront of all these discoveries. And I can think of AI, quantum, cybersecurity. It's fascinating when you go around the world that people refer to Canada as a leader when it comes to these cutting-edge technologies. And that's why our investment in science and research is making a huge difference.
I can't wait to see you at Seneca College in my writing, and consider that as an invitation.
Consider that as an acceptance.
Oh, perfect. Minister, you also have the legislation, Bill C-34, in the House, and which updates, well, if passed, will update Investment Canada Act. And we're looking forward to see this bill coming to this committee. Of course, in my writing, I represent a very diverse writing. There are immigrants, now Canadians coming from China, from Iran, from there's huge Armenian community, there's South Asian community, and a lot of these entrepreneurs now they're Canadian, but they weren't born in this country, so they are actually paying a special attention to this piece of legislation. Can you tell the committee why is it important that through this bill to maintain or to update or to protect Canada's national security interest?
Is fundamental, and I think I'd go back to questions from colleagues that I received earlier. I mean, what C-34 is trying to do is to provide the minister with more agility. We need to have better tools to protect our national security. We need to have more enforcement measures. We need to be able also to seek undertakings and impose conditions, something that our colleagues in the United States do regularly when they look at these transactions. And overall, I think it's about modernizing an instrument that has served Canada very well. And so that's why I'm very keen to work with you, to work with the committee, to make sure that we would have all the tools needed to protect our national security. Because today, and I was saying that before in one of the answers, national security and economic prosperity go hand in hand. And therefore, you need to make sure that you have a framework that will allow, and I go back to questions by Mr. Perkins, I think, at the beginning, and asking why this and that. I think what I'm asking Parliament is to make sure that the Minister of Industry and future ministers would have all the tools at their disposal to better protect the national security in Canada and our economic security as well, because we see state and non-state actor looking at what we're doing in Canada. And I think, to your point, when I said no to the takeover of 3 lithium mines by Chinese company, I think it sent a strong message that we take these matters very seriously. We rely on advice from our intelligence agencies. I work with Minister Medicino, Minister of Public Safety. But I think our allies, I can tell you around the world, look at that and say, Canada is serious. Canada is serious when it comes to national security. It's the same thing when it comes to research security. And I think we have to engage with eyes wide open and making sure we protect our assets, which are at the same time allowing for foreign investments to come to Canada, for sure, but at the same time making sure that we protect our national security.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Dong.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dung. Mr. Lemire, the floor is yours. Mr. Chair, for you, Minister, on numerous occasions you've talked about the importance of supporting research to make it more green, more agile, and also to decentralize budgets and to see to it that universities in Quebec have equal access. Now, regarding the report on the federal program on research, would it be possible to file Frédéric Bouchard's report for that was concluded in 22? And this in regard to Canadian universities and research. It would enable all of those supporting research, especially the funding agencies. And would it be possible to table that report? Thank you for the question. We talked about it with Mr. Bouchard and your colleagues. We're completely open to that. The point being that Mr. Bouchard's work, which is essential work, and he has presented his report to us, and I like what I see in the report. I think the recommendations are very important, and we are very in favor of transparency, and we think that report should be made public. And I think Mr. Bouchard is looking into how to make it public in the coming weeks. So what steps are missing to make it public? Well, we were asked if we were open to the idea, and the answer was yes. So as to next steps that will come, we are open to the report becoming public. So Canada is the only G7 country to have reduced its investments in research in recent years. So how do you react to that statistic? And we have done a great deal from 2016 to date. We have invested many millions. We have to continue, and all stakeholders had said it. That's why we're examining. There have been investments in the most recent budget. We'll continue to invest in research and science, as well as with students. If we want to retain the talent, we have to come up with scholarships and bursaries that are in tune with today's cost of living. So I've heard from lots of students, researchers, scientists who tell us we'd love to stay in Canada. And Canada does attract lots of talent, but we need the necessary funds. And we're working on it. We know how important it is, not just for today's prosperity, but the future. Very pleased to hear you talk about that. Thank you.
Monsieur Mas.
Thank you, Mr. Massé.
Again, Mr. Minister. I'm glad you said that I am the regulator a couple of times. Like the committee's done some really good work here on the Shaw-Rogers situation. And as you decide that, though, what hasn't taken place, there hasn't been regulators' support from the government on consumer issues in terms of pricing, where Australia and other countries have moved on that. Why haven't you used your position to influence regulation on pricing? That is something that we can do. And consumers, not only just in terms of you think as individuals, but also companies, small, medium-sized businesses, are paying through the nose for a Canadian public asset. That's what the spectrum is, and also the investment that we've made in billions of dollars of subsidies. So why not regulate some of the pricing that's taking place? I think it's time.
But I think you'll be happy because I said at the time that I would direct the CRTC with a new policy directive, and that policy is coming up, I think, as we speak, Mr. Massey. So you'll see that I've directed the CRTC with a new policy directive. I think it's the first one in many, many years, which puts competition and price at the center of that directive. So to your point, we are doing that. I'm like you, Mr. Massey. As you know, I want to reduce price for Canadians. That's why I've used all the tools at my disposal. And if Parliament was to give me more tools, I'd be happy to use them to make sure that we bring down prices at a time where people are struggling in every way with the price of grocery and the bills that they receive. Everything I can do, like you said, I have been pushing. You remember with the Competition Bureau, asking them to start an investigation on grocery to make sure that there was no unfair practice. Every time that I have regulatory power, you have seen me using them to the full extent to protect Canadian taxpayers and Canadian consumers.
Don't get me started on the grocery stuff. That's not. But because I only have probably 30 seconds to go, but I do want to go back though. Is that I mean, if you're going to wait for the CRTC, why not act in the interim at least, or is there a deadline for that action? Because it's almost like negligent at this point in terms of our pricing that we actually have versus this fact it's a Canadian public asset at the end of the day. So what's the plan in terms of how long will it take for the CRTC to come back, and why not act interim if that's the case?
Well, I think we've been acting because the tool that I have, and Mr. Massey, you're an experienced member of Parliament, is to policy direction the CRTC because I don't have that legal power as the regulator. I have powers with respect to spectrum. I don't have power when it comes to the elements that you mentioned. So that's why my tool is to a policy direction to the CRTC. That's what I've been doing. And this is going to be issued, I think, momentarily. So you'll see that. But I think we have the same interest. And colleagues on the other side as well. We want to see better prices, more competition, and we want to see innovation in the sector. I'm using every tool at my disposal to achieve that on behalf of Canadians.
Thank you very much, Mr. Massey. So it's already been an hour. It's hard to believe. Time flies. Mais oui, Monsieur Généreux, malheureusement.
Yes, Mr. Généreux, unfortunately.
C'est très généreux de votre part, Monsieur.
Well, that's very generous, Mr. Champagne. Mr. Généreux, you have the floor. No, Mr. Généreux, I wanted to be sure you did not think me, lacking in generosity. Thank you, Minister. I just did a Google and wanted to find out more about this Boeing aircraft. There's no relationship between you and the Boeing plane, but you did meet with Boeing last week. This is a joke, but let's be clear. The idea was I want Boeing investments in Canada. All right, I want to continue with AI, but there is a relationship between you and an eventual contract with Boeing. The media is talking about this, not me, but as a proud Quebecer and Canadian, I do believe we have to give an opportunity to Canadian businesses, Bombardier, for instance, to be able to bid. So I hope that you will be our champion and to talk with the Minister of Procurement as well as the minister in charge of, the Canadian Army, because our companies want to be able to bid. So my first question, is it your intention to meet with both those in the aerospatial sector in Quebec and Canada, just as you've just done in the United States, to eventually give these people an opportunity. I hope you have not given Boeing a blank check on your visit to the States. The difference between Canadian manufacturers, they have my phone number. They call me at least once a week, whereas in the United States, I don't see them often. Now, what was before the mission? It was to promote their interest. They told us before we went what they wanted. So it was our responsibility to go there. We say, there are opportunities, but we want economic spin-offs here at home. So we were there to promote Canadian companies in the States. Yes, but you must understand, we have companies that have the capacity to manufacture planes, and we brag about this, and you are bragging about, the climate, but Bombardier are, using 50% less fuel. You know all that, but I repeat it. Planes have evolved. Bombardier has evolved. Now, Canadian sovereignty, vis-a-vis its entire aerospatial industry, wanted to develop in Canada. Supply chains, yes, of course we need the United States, but in Canada we want to be able to have the same opportunities. I don't know where this news comes from, that you might be able to give a contract as quickly as in a few months, because it's going to take some 10 years to replace those planes. What's the urgency? Why are you moving so quickly? Once again, I repeat, we have to give the opportunity to Canadian businesses to bid. Well, I've heard you. I do want to come back on the interaction with Canadian manufacturers. As you know, Mr. Généreux, I know them very well, each and every one of them, and I'm a bit of their spokesperson, their champion. Before I left for Washington, most of those people contacted us because the idea, as I said earlier, Mr. Généreux, it's not just to integrate for those companies that sell in Canada. I want to get involved in global supply chains. I'm with you there. Yes, I think we are in the same wavelength. Just to be clear, we didn't go there for contracts. We went there for investments. That was the idea behind it. We said, we want you to invest in Canada. I follow you, and I'll be brief. My question for you is, are you going to be the champion, the spokesperson for Quebec and Canadian aerospatial companies to ensure that they have the right and the opportunity to bid? No one is asking you, for some kind of special deal. No, they want an opportunity to be able to tender. I believe that the Canadian and Quebec aerospatial companies have known for a very long time that I'm their champion. I've been that in many different departments. We have the capacity. Of course, the products that we sell have to adapt to the different missions that the Department of Defense might have. But I'm sure in 5 years we'll be able to look at each other in the eye and say, that was a mission that was necessary because we have to position Canada. Well, you didn't invite me. You invited my colleague. You're always invited, Mr. Généreux. It's always a pleasure to travel with. Well, I urge you to meet with the people at Bombardier, and I might have added other questions because there's additional money that is going into other regions of Canada, like Bell Canada. My colleague Lemire said it earlier. We would like a pan-Canadian strategy on aerospace, and it should be part of all that. It's a phenomenal industry in Canada, and we want to protect local jobs. We also need to get contracts elsewhere, but Canadian contracts, should help Canadian companies tender. Well, it is a pleasure. And in ending, Mr. Chair, Mr. Généreux, I think you've seen the most important announcement in the history of aerospace in Canada. It was made when I was Minister of Industry, with Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Legault. It was $1 billion one day, but we've invested more than $2 billion in aerospace. So those in the sector know we're at their side. And in Montreal, after Toulouse And Seattle, it's the third city in the world when it comes to aerospace. So that is the message I deliver to Washington. As you know, our neighbors, well, sometimes we're forgotten. We're too close. So I have to remind them what we're capable of doing. And Mr. Lemire was there. He knows how many times I said, we have talent. We have the ecosystems, and hybrid. We are at the cutting edge, and Pratt and Whitney is biggest factories is in Longueuil in Quebec. So we're well positioned for the future. Thank you, Mr. Minister. We must conclude this round. If not, your team will quarrel with me because I know you have a meeting at 5. Thanks for staying a little extra time with us. We always appreciate you coming to sit with our committee. And with that, I'll suspend for a few minutes.
rebonjour.
Good afternoon once again. We're now ready to move into our second hour for our meeting. And joining us are Francis Bilodeau, Associate Deputy Minister, welcome, as well as Mark Shannon, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategy and Innovation Policy Sector. Thank you both for joining us for this second hour. Without further ado, we're going to continue the discussion. I'll give the floor to Nathaniel Erskine-Smith. 5 minutes.
Thanks very much. I want to start with Mr. Kennedy, and I want to speak specifically to the role that our we still have the minister here?
No, the minister just left.
Okay. So then my question's to Mr. Kennedy. So I specifically in relation to the federal funding role through, we have the Sustainable Development Technology Fund, we have SIF, and yet there are a couple of other models that are of interest to me when I look at Bioindustrial Innovation Canada, for example, which is a nonprofit focused on sustainable chemistry, but they invest and they have a return, and then they invest again into new companies. They're doing good, but they're also profitable in terms of a sustainable financing model. Same with the DMZ out of Ryerson. They have their flagship incubator program takes 2.5%, and they're able to stand up very good companies. A lot of success there, but they're also a sustainably financed initiative and operation. When you look at standing up, whether it's investing in companies or standing up new programs, are we looking at this question of sustainable financing and making sure that our federal funding and taxpayer money is going a longer distance?
Thank you for the question. So, Mr. Chair, I would say, yes, that is something that we look at. You noted, the honourable member noted that there's a bunch of different models. And certainly, we're kind of mindful of the strengths and weaknesses of the different models. So, for example, the Strategic Innovation Fund, which is the biggest fund administered by ISED, it can take warrants, but it generally can't. It can't hold equity. It doesn't issue loans in the kind of classic sense the way a bank would. If we wanted to make significant changes to a fund like that, you'd actually have to change its underlying structure so that it could hold equity. It would function very differently. The oversight would be different under, the Financial Administration Act. So. These are all issues that we certainly are mindful of, and we work very closely with other entities like the Canada Infrastructure Bank and so on that actually have different kinds of authorities, and we work very closely with provincial organizations like Investissement Québec that again have different authorities. So I would say to the member, we're alive to this. Those are policy choices as to how the government, how governments decide to set up some of these instruments, and we do our best, within the design.
I recognize that, but in terms of providing advice to government, and you are in one of the most senior roles in providing that kind of advice to government, it does strike me, if you look at something like the Sustainable Development Technology Fund, that fund, for example, which is taking, I would say, risky but important bets, it makes a lot of sense that there probably be some kind of equity that comes back in some instances, whereas it may not make sense for other programs. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I don't think we have a culture in the government, frankly, or, I don't think we have a history across governments of a culture of looking at a return in a way that we've seen, and I use two examples, but it's possible to invest in important things from a public interest perspective, but also have a return to ensure that we see greater value for those dollars and we extend those dollars. Changing lanes to, let's go to the conversation we had recently. We had
Mr. Erskine-Smith, just one moment. Mr. Kennedy would like to add.
Just to Mr. Erskine-Smith's question, I would say that if you look at, for example, a program that can hold equity, and so you can hold on to equity, and the equity can earn a return, and so you can use that to reinvest. That's one way of doing it. Another way is to set up a program that has a repayment schedule, but the companies are repaying, and the money goes to the Consolidated Revenue Fund, and that money is then available to the Minister of Finance to determine how to spend it. There may be still funds coming back to the government to be recycled, but those two different funds are designed in a very different way. So if I use the Strategic Innovation Fund, for example, we actually calibrate the kind of grants and lending and so on that we do to, if you're a pre-revenue company with, really great intellectual property, but you actually don't have a lot of revenue coming in, that might result in a kind of structure where we take on more risk. If you're a company where there's a benefit to Canada, but actually, you as a company have deep pockets and can generate a lot of revenue, we might put something on the table that's fully repayable, and you have to repay the Crown. In the case of the Strategic Innovation Fund, we don't have a revolving fund where that money comes in and sits on our balance sheet that we can lend out again, but the money is still coming back to the Crown. It's still going back into the government's coffers.
Maybe if it's a good investment. If it's not, then it disappears. And we know very clearly when it comes to bioindustrial innovation and with DMZ, if the bets don't work, they don't have a business model anymore. Whereas Strategic Innovation Fund, if the bets don't work, we don't know. So it's a good point, and I'm out of time. So what would be very helpful actually is I would like to know, and you can follow up in writing, and sorry, you made more work for yourself, so I apologize, but it would be very helpful for you to lay out, when we look at the supercluster money and we look at SIF money, I would like to know what the return on those investments have been. So however you characterize it, but I think we should be clear-eyed about, we've put a lot of money into these programs. What's been the public interest return? And it might be return to taxpayer in terms of economic activity. It might be public interest advancement in particular technologies. But I would love to know what the credible return is on the money we've invested in the innovation ecosystem through Strategic Innovation Fund in particular. And I would expand it to the Sustainable Development Technology Fund. But I think we should be clear-eyed about what return are we getting for the work that we're putting in. So if you could follow up in writing, that would be appreciated.
That would be fine, Mr. Chair. There's no trouble. I mean, certainly as the Deputy Minister at ISET, I would hope that we would always strive to make sure there's a return to taxpayers, whether it's a public benefit return or an actual monetary return for the investments made. So I'm very happy to come back to the member with the answer to the question. Thanks.
Yeah, no, and I'm not dismissive. I know you care as well. It's not always clear to us what that return is. So anyway, but I appreciate it.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Perkin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perkin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Deputy. My initial question is a bit of a follow-up to Mr. Erskine-Smith in the sense that I actually did an order paper question trying to get some information on SR&ED, and it came back very light. Now, I understand it went to Revenue Canada, and it ended up going to Revenue Canada, not to industry. But the question I posed, because I'm being told quite often that the top users of SR&ED, well, technically Canadian companies, are almost all exclusively foreign multinationals that own those companies. So in essence, Canadian taxpayer money is being used to subsidize through the SR&ED credit foreign multinationals. And Revenue Canada, in response to my, and this may be a bit unfair because you haven't seen it, but Revenue Canada, in response to my order paper question, said the SR&ED program does not isolate the requested information for foreign-controlled corporations filing SR&ED, investment tax credits. Therefore, the requested information cannot be provided. The idea is they don't track the ownership of the companies that are claiming the tax credit. Don't you think it would be an important thing for us to know whether or not essentially we're subsidizing foreign companies or not in tracking where this, one of our largest, if not the largest, I think we spend more in SR&ED tax credits than we do in the SIF program. Wouldn't it be good to know whether or not we're subsidizing foreign multinationals?
Maybe to the honourable member's question, I'd be very happy to try to answer the question. I would say that we don't administer the program, and the responsibility for tax policy is the finance ministry. It's administered by the CRA, so I'm really kind of at a disadvantage. I think that would probably be best directed to them, but I certainly appreciate the question.
Okay, thank you. On the issue of, along the same lines, I've met with most of the granting councils in my role as the industry critic. And one of the things that they shared with me is basically that most of the research they've done and that they do is matched generally, again, by private sector companies to leverage that money in the research. And in almost every single case, not more than 9 out of 10 cases, that IP that develops out of that is owned by the multinational and not by the institution where the Canadian taxpayer money is going. And in that case, in more than 90% of the cases, they said it's a foreign multinational that is funding that. It's not generally a Canadian company. So in essence, we're subsidizing the invention of new things for foreign multinationals in our universities. And do you track that as well in terms of how much of our IP we actually fund through the granting councils is actually not owned by Canada?
I might ask one of my colleagues if they have a better answer than I do, but we have a great deal of statistical analysis on intellectual property, on ownership of IP. That specific one, the member's question, I don't know the answer to that. Colleague might, but I'm certainly happy to get back with some detail in that space if we have it.
If you could maybe table some of those numbers, unless Mr. Shen, unless you have something to add.
I don't have anything at the ready in terms of percentages. I would just note a couple of important efforts, though, in this space that I think are worth noting. One is through the National Intellectual Property Strategy that was first unveiled in 2018, but then subsequently added to in a number of subsequent years. There's been considerable effort placed on trying to ensure the maximization of intellectual property in the Canadian space. One of those programs is a tool actually called Explore IP that actually allows for federally funded research and development through the universities and colleges to be held in a repository, to be able to be easily partnered with Canadian small and medium-sized enterprises.
For commercialization.
For commercialization purposes, with a tool to be able to try and understand its access and its current relevance to the
But that's on the
goals.
ones that we own, whereas it seems like 90% of them go down to. So if I could move on to my next question, because I'm running out of time. The issue in both 2017 with the takeover by Hytera of Norsat and the takeover of the Tanko mine in 2019 by Sinomine, and I know this predates you, Deputy, but in both cases, the previous minister, Navdeep Bains, did not ask for a national security review. Could you explain to us how the department comes to that conclusion when a Chinese state-owned enterprise is taking over a Canadian asset in telecommunications and mining, that the advice to the minister would be that you don't even need to do a national security review?
Well, Mr. Chair, I would just maybe a general answer to that, that there's a formal process that can be triggered to kind of get additional time, and you kind of get put into kind of a formal process. But as a general rule, any investment that comes across our desk or that is drawn to our attention, and this can be even just sort of, intelligence that's gleaned from the press, there is a kind of proactive effort to kind of look at potentially problematic investments. The national security community is involved in that. We work very closely with our partners in the Public Safety Ministry and the RCMP and CSIS and others. And it's through that assessment process that typically a kind of a judgment is made as to whether a particular investment presents a concern. And if it presents a concern, then, additional measures can be taken or the investment can be blocked. I'm not really, as you might understand, I'm not really in a position to talk about those particular historic investments. What I can say is that the kind of tempo of activity and the level of scrutiny has generally gone up significantly. And if you look at the statistics, that's very clear from the statistics. We publish an annual report with statistics on the use of the Investment Canada Act, and so the number of blocks and reviews and so on has generally been going up. And with C-34, our hope is to have a kind of, as the minister explained, a more flexible set of tools that will allow us to be able to be, even that much more responsive going forward. So.
I'll try to ask it quickly. Last week in Public Accounts Committee, officials stated that in the Medicago case of the closing of the biotechnology company, that the government's prepaid contract to buy $20 million doses of the vaccine at $30 a dose, in other words, $600 million, that there was actually negotiation going on as to how much the government would have to pay for those vaccines that were not produced or delivered. Is it true that we are going to be paying some portion of that $600 million for vaccines that never got produced or delivered?
Mr. Chair, what I would say, just for clarification, that with regard to Medicago, there's kind of two laneways. Laneway number one is the negotiation of these doses that were done under these advanced purchase agreements. That's led by Public Services and Procurement, working closely with the health portfolio. And then there's our work with the company to actually support the development of the vaccine and to support the expansion of their facility in Canada. And that's principally us. So I'd certainly be happy to talk a little bit about the work we did to support them in developing the vaccine and building out their facility in Quebec City. But we were not directly involved. It's not really our authority, the dose purchases, the actual purchase of the vaccine.
Thank you. Madame Lapointe pour 5 minutes. Vous semblez être en sourdine, Madame Lapointe. Vous êtes encore en sourdine.
You're still on mute. Now it's working. Yes, you're good now. The floor is yours.
This committee has done some work around cybersecurity and IP theft, and I would like to know, what is the government doing to ensure that Canadians are adequately protected against these cybersecurity threats, the foreign interference, and IP theft?
Well, Mr. Chair, there are a number of things we're doing in this space. I could perhaps cite a couple, but it's certainly an area that we do take very seriously. The first is that in our major funding programs, this is a discussion we have with companies that wish to receive support from the government. So, for example, in the Strategic Innovation Fund, when we're working with a Canadian or a corporate entity that's looking for support to invest in its innovation, we want to make sure that they actually have appropriate safeguards and controls around cybersecurity. I would note that that was a particular issue at the height of the pandemic when we were working very closely with a range of life science companies that were actually, it was a well-known kind of fact that that these were particularly ripe targets for exploit by malign actors looking to get information about what companies were doing in the vaccine and therapeutic space. So we do that through our programming. The government has announced, its intent to ban a number of actors from Canada's 5G networks as a way to enhance kind of the security of Canada's telecommunications infrastructure. So those would be kind of two examples, I guess I could cite, where we are actively involved as a ministry in trying to tighten up security. Thank you.
We heard the minister say in his remarks earlier that he'd heard someone say that the research of today is the economy of tomorrow. And so I would be interested to learn, how will the new Canadian Innovation Investment Agency help improve private sector investments in research and development in Canada?
I think, Mr. Chair, there was some good discussion of this in the context of the last budget, but maybe just to kind of paraphrase a little bit the rationale. The evidence is pretty clear that Canada does a really good job at the generation of ideas, but there has been difficulties in kind of translating really good ideas in intellectual property into the Canadian business sector, and there has been some interesting, examples internationally. Israel is an example. Scandinavian countries have been successful at this, of having state-supported enterprises that work with businesses to kind of support them in the adoption of technology and the integration of new ideas and intellectual property into their businesses. And so the thinking is to kind of draw from these examples internationally and have a kind of, in the unique Canadian context. And that's kind of the genesis of the Innovation and Investment Agency. My understanding is that more information will be made public shortly. The government, we've been working very closely with the Department of Finance on the design of this new organization, and we're very hopeful that we will be able to talk in more detail about that shortly once the government makes the detailed plans known on the next steps.
Thank you. Another study that we did at this committee involved quantum computing. And I would want to know what you and your department are doing to support the quantum sector in Canada. And I have a second part to that question, and that is that what we heard from some of the witnesses, we have a lot of talent around that, but that we were losing them. And so, what are we doing not only to attract but retain some of the talent that we have in the quantum sector here in Canada?
So in this space, Mr. Chair, the member may know that the government announced a new quantum strategy. There have been a lot of work with various actors in the quantum sector in Canada in the lead up to announcing the intent to develop this strategy. There have been a whole series of consultations since then to kind of define in more detail the strategy. The announcement of the strategy was backed up with new investments to kind of support its execution. I'd be happy to come back to the committee if it's of interest with a kind of 1 or 2 pager to just describe kind of the current state of affairs. But that particular strategy is kind of being rolled out now, and we're just kind of at the stage now of having completed the consultations and kind of moving ahead on next steps.
And maybe just building on items that Simon mentioned, the strategy was actually formally announced this January, so it's brand new, and actually built back by real funding. So it's about $360 million over 7 years, and focused around 3 missions: a mission around computing and hardware, a mission around communications and sensors. And so the intent is really to build up capacity in that space, both on the research and on the commercialization side, to build an ecosystem where we can develop top talent and then link it eventually to our industry, and where we can benefit from the important advances in quantum for Canada.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Bilodeau.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bilodeau. Mr. Lemire. Thank you for being here today. I'd like to hear you about the mineral industry. We're talking a lot about energy transition, and I've listened to Mr. Champagne's speeches abroad. Now, to be able to sell strategic critical minerals, you need a mining sector. So, and you want it to be green as soon as you bring it out from under the earth. So Mr. Champagne has talked about different elements, some being fundamental. So when you look at this, and you need the ecosystem to succeed, you need universities and so forth, and a great deal of support for companies focused on innovation. So you need, those who are building the mine, you need extraction capacity, and you need innovative companies, Abria, Technos, others. How do you intend to support those companies to help green mining? Because procurement's going to be done internationally more and more to reduce carbon footprint. We don't want to miss the boat. We need to invest in our mines. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. For this question, the government strategy for critical minerals involves many different departments: natural resources, as well as our department. And our main role is that we have a fund for investment into projects, $1.5 billion in total. And we would like to move projects forward that are tied into our supply chains and work with sectors that are emerging Canada: batteries, electric vehicles. And we're interested in everything you've already described. Yes, we are working with companies to open up new mines and to make our mines greener, to reduce greenhouse gases, and to put in place green technologies. So we have negotiations with a number of different mines and stakeholders, a range of actors. Second, it's also necessary from time to time to make the link between the big companies and the mines. And you have, the chicken egg. You don't have the mines, you don't have the companies, you don't have the companies, you don't have mines. You have to do a bit of matchmaking. And we're working closely with auto manufacturers. So we're in a position to do some of this matchmaking between actors. And I believe this is our role. Well, my time is almost up. I would like you to reflect on how we can better support innovation, maybe through a tax credit for those who are developing the mines. Sometimes they're subcontractors, but they often are the ones taking the financial risk, and their wiggle room and, of course, their credibility to deliver on time is, important. But maybe they could benefit for an innovation tax credit. Thank you, Mr. Lemire. Mr. Massey.
Chair, and I'm going to start with a quote here. If Canada is to succeed in making the cars of the future, we must embrace greener, more sustainable technologies. These technologies will create the well-paying middle-class jobs of the future. Advanced research and development project challenge today's auto workers to enhance their skill set by having a workforce with skills that are in demand and technologies that will shape the future of the industry. Canada's auto sector can secure its place in the global supply chain of tomorrow, said then Honourable Navdeep Bains, Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. The reason I raise that is because I'm still a little bit concerned about accountability. That was with regards to, in 2019, the $3 million the federal government gave to NEMAC. NEMAC was a former supplier of General Motors in Canada. It's a Mexican-based company. And what happened there is what we're trying to solve, or at least to have some accountability, because that $3 million led to the innovation on the site, then supposedly 70 jobs, that then later on led to NEMAC taking that innovation and moving it to Mexico, and we lost an additional 200 jobs, and it was left to John Dagnolo of Local 200 of Unifor to actually take this to arbitration to protect the workers. So my question is what have we learned in that scenario there? And when I look at Medicago and other places, I'm really concerned. I mean, we have to be in the game when it comes to automotive innovation. There's no doubt, especially when you look at what the United States is doing. But we essentially use $3 million of federal money to ship 200 plus local Unifor jobs to Mexico. What have we learned from that lesson? And that's not too far away.
So, Mr. Chair, maybe in response to the member's question, perhaps I could just provide a measure of assurance at any rate that officials take these kinds of concerns very seriously. We want to make sure that when the government, through a vehicle like the Strategic Innovation Fund, for example, is putting resources into a company, that Canadians' interests are protected. And frankly, we want that because that's the best outcome for Canada, but we also want that because we don't want to be in a situation where something untowards happens and we're not able to explain that we put protections in place. So I can say that when we are negotiating, for example, under the SIF or other instruments as a kind of standard approach, we try to ensure that there are really strong safeguards around protection of intellectual property, the ability to have remedies when companies don't do the things that they promise they're going to do, to have very strong clauses that allow us to be in a position to take action.
But as a member of Parliament, we don't get those things. So we don't get those things, and the government hasn't released this contract. I had to go through Freedom of Information Act to get some of the information, and if it wasn't for John Dagnolo and Local 200 who fought it through arbitration, the government was never to be found there. So, so I appreciate. I know that public servants don't look to try to fund exportation of our jobs. But at the same time, we're going to be faced with a mountain of challenges with U.S. innovation subsidies that are coming in. With they have Buy America, Buy American. Biden is even there are actually percentages, so forth. What is being done differently today than before about where we're looking to actually have auto investments on greener technology?
Well, Mr. Chair, I would say that certainly officials at ISED and across the government are very, very seized with the implications of the Inflation Reduction Act. It is not just in the auto sector; it's in multiple sectors that really span the whole economy, all across the country. We see the implications of the U.S. legislation, even in our discussion with companies now. So it's something that we're taking very seriously. And I maybe at this point, I would just note for the member the comments that the government had in its fall economic statement, where it kind of acknowledged that this was a very significant new development, and that the government would be taking steps to, I believe the language was kind of ensure a level playing field. So I know this is something that, the finance ministry is also looking at very carefully.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just not satisfied, right, as our accountability levels here. And I want us to have a national auto strategy, but I'll leave that behind for now. I do want to get to something else, and I do appreciate, I know that that's not the intent of these things, but I mean, it's a clear example of how disastrous the policy can be if it's not wielded properly. And it may sound like $3 million is not a lot of money, but it is. And when we export these jobs, it's really poor. I wouldn't switch channels a little bit. What are you doing internally with regards to retention of staff? I know this is totally different of where we're at, but we're looking at challenges in all the sectors. The minister has several fronts on C34, 27, a whole series of things. What are we doing internally to make sure that the public service has, the skill sets necessary to help provide the proper information for the minister in the research, and what are we doing for retention of individuals as we negotiate new things that are taking place than ever before? So I'll leave it there, and that's my time. Thanks.
Well, maybe, Mr. Chair, just to say I really appreciate the member's question. It's not the sort of thing that, maybe discussed a lot at committee, but I would say it's something that, as the deputy minister, and I know my colleagues at the senior management table spend a lot of time worrying about and take very seriously. So very briefly, because I know there are other members who want to talk, we have spent a lot of time on the future of work and about how do we migrate from, the kind of where we were pre-pandemic, and then we had the pandemic, and now we're not exactly post-pandemic, but we're all feeling our way with the new world of work. That's something that management team has spent a lot of time on. We've also spent a lot of time on trying to build an organization that is, I guess I would call it more welcoming and more diverse, where everybody feels, kind of included, and we're, doing we're working very hard on making sure that we have a diverse and kind of a management team that represents the country, and that people who come to work at ISED feel like it's a good representation of of the kind of look and feel of Canada. And I would also say that we are, trying to attract and build the competencies that will be needed, as the member said, in some of these new sectors. A really good example of this is on biomanufacturing and life sciences, where when the pandemic hit, for a bunch of historic reasons, we didn't have a lot of capacity, and we've been working ever since to try to rebuild that skill set inside the ministry, because we now have had a resurgence of the life science industry in Canada, and we need to have at least some capacity in the government that understands that industry, works with it, and so on. We have that in automotive, thankfully. We need to rebuild it in some areas, so that's a real focus too, is getting some depth in some of these areas that are very important.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Viss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses here today. I'm referring to Supplementary Estimates B, pages 269. It outlines we voted on an additional $2.8 million for funding for the Small Business Entrepreneurship Development Fund. I think that takes the total a couple pages down on page 272 to something around $28 million in total. What has been the impact of this program in respect to jobs created, access or loan access or capital funding access for new businesses? And for the businesses that have used the small business, this development fund, are many of them still in existence 3 years after they initially received support from this program or through one of their local banks funded by ISED? Thank you.
Sure, and maybe I can start, and Simon will want to supplement. So the Small Business Entrepreneurship Development Program, or within the terms and conditions, is actually supporting a suite of programming, and that includes targeted programming, for example, for women entrepreneurs, for Black entrepreneurs, and so that funding has been rolling out, including providing support, in some cases directly to businesses, and in some cases to organizations that are supporting and building capacity. I think we are trying to build an ecosystem through this program and through other programs, partly delivered through programming led by Minister Ng in some of these instances, to be able to create an environment that will allow our small and medium-sized companies to thrive, have access to capital, and have access to the supports and the capacity building they need. And so that will be the focus of the SBED program. I don't know if, Simon, you wanted to add.
Well, that's helpful. I'm going to jump into another question because I have very limited time. Actually, that brings me to another question I can ask on page 269. That is funding for the 50-30 challenge. There was another approximately the same amount of money, close to $2.8 million. Do you believe that Industry Canada is reflective of the ideals it is trying to espouse in the private sector, namely being actually reflective of multicultural Canada? I quickly Googled here today that about 26% of Canada is of a visible minority. And I'm just wondering, is the Department of Industry really in a place to be telling small businesses and even large businesses in Canada what their diversity makeup should be?
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, what I would say would be that the 50-30 challenge is just that. It's kind of a challenge to the broader set of organizations, not just the business sector, but not-for-profit and voluntary, to take this on and to take it seriously. We're doing the same thing in the ministry. I would agree that we need to go further in this space and need to do more. And what I would say is that the funding that has been put out has largely been actually to experts in this space. It's not ICED that has been developing the tools. It has been organizations out in the community, generally who have deep expertise, organizations that have, that are kind of representative of Canada's diversity, that are developing the toolkits and so on that are meant to be available for organizations. So if you're a business or you're not for profit and
That's very helpful, Mr. Kennedy. Would you be actually be able to provide maybe a 1 or 2 pager to the committee further explaining some of the actions under the 50-30 program? It caught my eye simply because it was under the item I wanted to discuss above in the estimates. Thirdly, with my remaining time, and I know I'm going really quickly here, Pacifican is a relatively new it is a new development organization specifically for British Columbia. I asked in the House of Commons before why on a per capita basis, though, it's receiving a bit less funding than some of the other economic development agencies across Canada. What led to that, especially when the Government of Canada is seeking to set up new offices in, I believe, 2 or 3 locations throughout the province? Why do British Columbians get less for economic development than other regions of Canada?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, I think that one would probably be best directed to the responsible minister. And I say that because there was an occasion where the regional development agencies, as a kind of machinery point of view, actually reported in through ICED. That is no longer the case. So they actually report to their own separate ministries. So they're good colleagues of ours, but we don't have any oversight over them. So it's really, it would be me commenting on another department's mandate and budget. So I think that would probably be best directed to the Pacifican Minister or DM. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. I wasn't aware of that change, or else I wouldn't have asked that question. Finally, I see a line item for about $500,000 on funding for a business data lab. Why does ICED need $500,000 to fund a data lab? Is Statistics Canada not sufficient?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chair, we'll have to just get back. To be frank, I don't know. I'm not familiar with what that is. It may have a name that I just don't recognize, but we're happy to come back to the committee with an answer to the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Viss, this is all of your time, so we'll now turn for our last questioner to MP Chang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. What step is your department taking to address systemic inequity that remains present in our society? Can you share with this committee your collaboration with various communities and how you have incorporated diverse views of Canadians into your workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I can start, and Simon, please feel free. In a number of ways, we've started touching on some of the elements. So there were questions earlier around 50-30 and some of the program around that to support diversity on boards and in companies. And then we touched on some of the program, which is specifically intended to support small business owners and small businesses in equity-seeking groups. And we've certainly launched the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, the Black Entrepreneurship Programs. And so there's a suite of programs to ensure access to capital and supports. And at the same time, we've led work within our own department to try and lead by example. And so we have a chief diversity officer, for example, within our department, who's helping us put in place measures to make sure, and Simon pointed this to earlier, to make sure that we as an organization also represent the diversity. At the same time, as we've been working with, for example, some of the research and the granting organizations, the tri-councils and the granting organizations have put in place an EDI strategy that they're pursuing to ensure that there's support also for researchers coming from equity-seeking groups. I don't know, Simon, if you wanted to add.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would just say that this is a topic that we take very seriously. As my colleague explained, we have I would say we try to have a holistic approach to how we address it. So there's a suite of programming that's kind of facing the business sector and facing into the community. There's been a lot of work inside the ministry to ensure that equity, diversity, and inclusion are kind of squarely on our agenda. We have an external advisory committee with representatives from the private sector and academia and so on to actually help us with this issue. We have a chief equity and inclusion officer, as my colleague explained. So we'd be happy to provide more information, but just to say there's a lot of activity. I wouldn't want to use too much of the time, but there's a lot of activity in this, trying to deal with these priorities.
Thank you so much. As I represent the riding of Markham Unionville, one of the most diverse community right across Canada, so it's very important that we as a department and as government work towards equity for all Canadians here. So that's why it's important for me to ask that question. But in regards to artificial intelligence, could you elaborate for this committee on how the government is trying to be more proactive and look forward in our approach to emerging technology and their regulations, and how are we protecting Canadians' privacy?
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, I could answer in two parts, and my colleague might want to elaborate a little bit. So one is that support for the Canadian artificial intelligence community and for research in this space is a real priority. The government has the Pan-Canadian Strategy for Artificial Intelligence, which it announced a number of years ago, and we've just kind of announced, I guess it was last year, but it was relatively recently, the kind of next phase of the Pan-Canadian Strategy. And in that renewal of the strategy, we put an increased emphasis on translating the intellectual property developed, the ideas and the IP developed by our researchers, actually translating that into use in the Canadian economy and by Canadian organizations. And there's all kinds of really great examples, of that kind of happening in real time, in hospitals and in businesses and so on. We've also put a priority in making sure that our researchers have access to the sort of specialized computing power that's needed. So there's been an effort in the second phase of the strategy to be adapted and to be focusing on areas that were considered to be maybe areas that weren't as strong in the first version of the strategy. And then on the legislative and regulatory front, the government has tabled Bill C-27, and there's a whole section of that legislation, which is a new proposed law on artificial intelligence and basically to ensure that AI is used responsibly in the economy. And so we're looking forward to discussion at committee and more as that bill advances through the parliamentary process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy and MP Chang. This is all the time we had today. So thank you very much for joining us at committee this evening. Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the interpreters.
With conservatives and very conservative with liberals because they have more access to ministers. So, yes, on that note, meeting adjourned.